to hop on today and make a video about this article that has been making the rounds of the internet over the past few days. So I don't have an outline today. My thoughts are maybe not all gathered already, but I had a lot of thoughts about this article, things that are coming up, so I thought I'd just pop on and see what is coming up. So the name of this article is The Rise of Lonely Single Men, and the subheader is Dating Apps and a Drastically Changing Relationship Landscape. It's on Psychology Today. There will be a link in the description if you'd like to go read the article. Especially people have been focusing their attentions on one of the key points of the article, which is a bullet point at the top. Dating opportunities for heterosexual men are diminishing as healthy relationship standards change. So a lot of people have been, focusing on this, focusing on the headline. And I've seen a lot of responses from people who are not cisgender heterosexual men who are sort of pointing and laughing, sort of making fun of them, making fun of the situation. This is very much not how I feel. But I understand how people get there. I think there can be this knee-jerk reaction within the context of the patriarchy, like, oh, men have all this power, they have all this privilege, something bad is happening to them, like, let's celebrate, like, tee-hee, and I think what this approach really misses is that patriarchy is hurting men too, and making light of the situation is sort of just recirculating this hurt. And, probably the people I'm thinking about who are making these responses are thinking, oh, it's not that deep. It sort of is. When, you're making these quick judgments about yourself as being better than these men when, on the one hand, dating is not necessarily better for people who are not men. It might be a little better in certain ways, but there are so many other factors. And dating as a whole, I think there's a lot of critiques you could offer of dating within the context of our society, right? This is something I will want to expand on in the future. But I have this idea of the love market, of how capitalism really influences the way we think about love and how we search for love and how we seek to build relationships. So, this article is specifically looking at how the numbers are stacked against men in dating apps. I think these dating apps really are designed to make a profit. They're designed to keep us on them, which is maybe not conducive to long-term relationships or any other type of relationship that would be in any way fulfilling enough to leave the app. So I think in really big ways, speaking as a queer person who is I've dated first, before I came to understand myself as queer, I was dating as a cisgender heterosexual man. That's my history. Now I'm in dating spaces as a queer, non-monogamous, sexual person. And you would think that there would be huge differences, but the differences are really not that big. People still, there's this issue around, oh, men are looking for a mother, right? Men, there's this dual thing of on the one hand, men are looking for a mother who will take care of them. On the other hand, men are looking for this childlike beauty that is uncorrupted, right? This idea of the mother, but then also the very young, and this is where our society is pushing for sexualizing very young people, and that this is reflected in who is considered to be attractive. I've noticed that these trends are very much present also in queer dating and queer relationships, and also in non-monogamous relationships, is that people are looking for someone to be their parent, are looking for someone to save them, and are not fully emotionally grounded in their sense of self, and that are reaching out to form a relationship from a sense of like seeking to fill a hole that is bigger than one person can fill. I think like our lack of community connections is a big part of why dating is so fraught, because if you could imagine a situation where we're all embedded in communities and we have lots of rich, rewarding relationships that are maybe not romantic or sexual in nature, that those romantic and sexual connections would sort of naturally arise out of other fulfilling types of relationships within your community. So, why are dating apps even a thing? Like, if we had a functioning society, we could theoretically make them obsolete. I think also of this idea of like relationship standards, right? Like there's a lot that's going into that phrase. I know like other people have talked extensively about the history of like, I guess like lean in feminism, and how in particular white women like led the way into the workplace and into like gaining financial independence, gaining the ability to like have a bank account and vote and like own property. And those certainly are rights that, women should have within the context of our existing society. But sort of what this did was it split the amount of money that people were making, so that in order to have a functioning household, you needed not one income, but two or more. So it's like just the pie got split. Instead of saying there's so much, we all can have enough, the existing amount of resources was split amongst all of the working class people who are asking for more resources. And there has been women and also non-white people and other people of marginalized identities that have been allowed into positions of power so long as they are still operating from a ruling class perspective. So nothing really changes. But as a result of these sociological and economic changes within the context of familial relationships, men are like losing the sense of like dependability and privilege that their position of like father had rested upon, the position of breadwinner had rested upon. And so, of course, like if they're told all their life you're going to be this thing, and then society is set up so that they can't, of course they're going to be lonely, of course they're going to despair, and of course there's this question of like, what really can I offer to people? And people are saying, well, you can't offer me this, so why should I date you? And I think like very much people should be asking for emotional availability in their intimate relationships, and should be looking for people who they share values with. But I think also saying that there's lonely single men who are in the dating sphere, people are running into them and saying, this is not good enough for me, like this relationship, it's also worth tracing back, like, how did these men get to be this way? Like, where did they learn to be not available emotionally? And also, where did they learn that they are wanting someone to mother them? Usually it's within the context of their own mother or their family relationships, in which, young boys are, I think, in some ways coddled in the sense of like they can do no wrong, and that's the influence of patriarchy. And then also emotionally neglected, so not provided skills to navigate conflict because they can do no wrong, not provided support to figure things out, whether that's like, here, just all this independence, we're not going to help you, or let me just take care of everything for you, sort of like how different gendered perspectives apply to parenting. I think of like young boys and friendship, and how young girls are socialized to be emotionally intimate and to connect with others, but for young boys, they're really socialized to compete and to be strong and to like build a reputation of whatever. And so men put all of their emotional needs onto the women in their lives, and usually that ends up being their mother. And then when they get old enough, their monogamous female partner. And I will say, like, some of this stuff applies to me too, in my experience growing up, in the sense that I like was sensitive and vulnerable and emotional as a child, and that was bullied out of me. And it's only taken me time to be able to return to that. And prior to my like deep introspection and growth, and also some people who really helped me along the way, I would be one of these lonely single men. And I've met a lot of people who are these lonely single men. These are the same men who are, it's not the same exact people, but it's the same conditions that are giving rise to our mass shooting events in the United States, which is a universally like white male thing. But then also like how many men are committing suicide, which is at far greater numbers than any other group. So I do think we need to do something about this despair that is in cisgender men. Like, it's a societal issue, and I think pointing and laughing at them is exactly the wrong response, right? Because what is happening to these men? Who is speaking to these men? Overwhelmingly, it is white, supremacist, right-wing fascists who are saying, hey, these feminazis are saying that you're the problem, and I know you're struggling, so why don't you come listen to me instead? I'll tell you about how the globalist and the Jews are, and like, my apologies for that language, I could have been more sensitive about that. That's their language and not mine. But yeah, these white supremacist people will speak directly to these disenchanted young men and to say, hey, your position of power and authority and privilege has been revoked, and they want to take that from you. And of saying, like, there is a limited amount of, like, when it comes to rights, like, people have rights in a society, that there's a limited amount, and that these other groups are trying to take some directly away from men, in particular white men. But there are other communities of men who are not white, who are right in lockstep with this. And there's also women who are very much in service of patriarchy as well. The white supremacists are talking with them, and they're saying, and so this is where like the traditionalist perspective comes in, if we should go back to the way things were when they were good, when men could have, own a home and could have a good amount of income, and where everyone could have a wife or a partner, really saying like, this was taken from you and we should take it back. And then also this is where incels come from, involuntarily celibate people. That term actually was created, I don't remember what the demographics were of the person who created it. It was not a cisgender man, because cisgender men are not the only people who struggle with not having sexual relationships. I think that's a thing a lot of us can struggle with at different points in our lives. But that it's sort of been taken up as a movement amongst these disenchanted right-wing white supremacist men, and there's this overlap between people causing violence and white supremacist and incel ideology. But this is all a natural consequence of the harm that we expose boys to from a very young age within our society, when it comes to patriarchy within the family, when it comes to And patriarchy within the family refers to like direct abuse as well as neglect. It refers to like a lack of emotional closeness. It refers to, this assumption that boys are not deserving of emotional connection and of care. And in schools, you see the same thing. And also like the sort of like group socialization of like, because the school is patriarchal, because the family is patriarchal, and the government and the media are all patriarchal, then like, what chance do these little kids have to not be patriarchal towards each other? They have no chance. So I don't think they start off that way. I think, boys are naturally emotionally wanting to connect and naturally wanting to build intimate relationships and to be vulnerable. And that is something our patriarchal society trains out of them. So this is all to say, this article is not really looking at root causes. It's sort of sensationalized, and this is something Psychology Today is a shit publication, but because they never look at the root cause, and because they tend to advance ruling class ideology. And in this article, what you get is, these there's something wrong with these boys, they need to go to therapy. Which I'm not saying that therapy won't help, because it can help. Not all therapists will be helpful, but some can be helpful in helping you to process the impacts of patriarchy on your life, and in helping you to have these experiences and gain these skills that you previously had lacked. But really, we need more stuff to happen to change the situation and for more men to go to therapy. Really what we need is a feminism that is inclusive of the experiences of everybody who is impacted by patriarchy. And so that means men, women, young people, trans and non-binary people, specifically inclusive of disabled people and Black and Indigenous people, and anyone else who I maybe neglected to mention. Feminism inclusive of everybody. And what that really means is our capacity for developing intimate, caring relationships, and how that is necessarily connected to social change that gives us the capacity to do this. And that's connected to things like, family leave policies. It's connected to universal housing, universal healthcare, universal food, and water, immigration policy. It's connected to land back, to Indigenous people. Pretty much everything is connected to why men and boys are fucked up. And I think we really have to be empathetic and think about how much they're struggling and how deeply society needs to change to do right by them. And it's not just to do right by them, but it's to do right by everybody. I think in terms of solidarity, our struggle with the patriarchy is linked, everyone, which is why we need a feminism for everybody. And it doesn't even really need to be called feminism. That word has a lot of baggage. But really, to challenge and uproot and dismantle and abolish patriarchy. And that patriarchy applies to everyone because we are within a patriarchal society. So, screw patriarchy. Dating apps, I have learned over and over, are not a great place to find connection because of the way that they're structured. And there's a reason that there's a lot I didn't even get into, the fears of interacting with men on these dating apps and the behavior, which is really not helping. I didn't really get into the actual specifics. But you can imagine, the lack of emotional connection, and I'm sure many of you have your own personal experiences, the lack of emotional connection, the lack of vulnerability, sense of entitlement, how this plays out, when people are sending out messages and when people are meeting up, certainly not helping when people act like that, in terms of, sending out harmful messages and being very disconnected from self and from others. I think I'm going to end here. My thoughts were a little scattered today, but I will be expanding in a more organized way later. I just wanted to sort of briefly comment on this article, which again is linked below. If you liked my rambling, there's more videos on my channel. And I also have a Patreon. If you'd like to directly support me, you can also like this video and subscribe to my channel. And please do share your thoughts also in the comments below.